right. Well, welcome again to Connections Church. So glad that you're here today. Again, happy Mother's Day to all the moms here today. Grateful that you are celebrating with us. We appreciate you, and we're grateful to have you worshiping with us today. So I have a gift for all the moms here today. And it might not be what you expect. In fact, I'm sure it's not what you expect. It's not a trinket or a flower or something like that. It's more of a concept. It's a reminder that I want to share with you today. So are you ready for my gift? Yeah, okay. You're ready? Maybe reluctantly ready for it. Here it is, permission to rest. That's my gift to you. Permission to rest. Now, like it's probably not what you expected to receive as a gift from me today. And let me just say that I understand you do not need my permission at all to rest. Hopefully you just rest. And so it's really more of a gift that I'm reminding you of. It's a gift actually that we have from God, not just for moms, but for all of humanity. God has given us a gift of rest. In fact, not only has he given us permission to rest, he has a persistence about it, that he wants us to rest. So that's my gift to you today. Maybe you were hoping for a hug or something like that, but no, it's permission to rest. Now here's the deal. What I know about moms is that moms are often like the busiest people that I know. Moms experience a unique pressure, a pressure to have all the answers, to have it all together, and to do everything with excellence. Probably not a pressure you should have, but it's often a pressure that you experience. And that's not just something that moms experience. That's something that we deal with as humans, though I think moms deal with it in a particular kind of way. But really, we can all probably connect with that, right? We all experience pressure like that. And technology hasn't made it any easier. Maybe we thought it was going to make it easier, but it really hasn't made it easier. We have so much pressure to do everything. And now with technology, we have to look really good while we do everything. Make sure we capture all of those moments with a little tagline that says something like #blessed. Now, if you don't know what a hashtag is, you're in good company. I don't really know what a hashtag is either, but that's what the kids are saying these days, evidently. Just kidding. Okay, now here's the deal. We know that rest is a good thing. I don't think anybody in here would say that rest isn't a good thing. We know rest is a good thing. And if you've read the Bible at all before in your life, if you have any familiarity, you probably know that rest is even commanded by God. And yet, busyness can become a sin that unfortunately we sort of tend to celebrate in the church. It's one of those things that we think is a good thing when people are too busy, but I'm not so sure it is a good thing. And furthermore, our culture, 21st century American culture, man, we sure do idolize materialism. Big time. We're probably all guilty of it. Like as the bank account grows, our ability to say yes to any and every opportunity increases as well. We can say yes, and so we often do say yes, whether we should or not. And then all of a sudden we realize that we have become slaves to our own busyness and our own materialism. And let's be honest, the problem goes both ways. So for some, probably most of us struggle with being too busy, but there are others that are maybe not busy enough. Maybe your struggle is you rest too much, right? It can go both ways. So what do we do with all that? How do we solve that problem? I'm here to tell you there is a better way. There's a better way. And it probably won't surprise you to know that we find a better way in the scriptures. You're in church today, probably won't surprise you to know that I'm going to share that better way with you, whether you want to hear it or not. We have permission from God to rest. So here's the big question we're going to ask and answer today. It's this: how should I rest? How should I rest? Now that might seem like a really silly question, really simple and silly kind of question, but here's what I know, especially in our culture today, we're pretty terrible at it. Even when we say we're resting or taking a day off, we're usually busy doing something, right? I struggle at this. I struggle at this. Main scripture is Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Now, last week we kicked off a new series on the book, in the book of Genesis. Genesis is the first book in the Old Testament. It's all about the beginning. And so last week we looked at day 6 of creation in particular from chapter 1, where God created human beings, male and female, in his image. This week we're going to jump into chapter 2, but we're not going to get very far, only 3 verses. And we're going to focus today on the 7th day of creation, where God ceased all his work. He rested. Now, the Lord didn't need rest. He wasn't tired from all the work that he had done. The biggest takeaway we have is that we think that he was modeling rest for us. The concept of Sabbath is introduced in day 7 of creation, Genesis chapter 2, though you might find it interesting to know that the word Sabbath is not used in this passage. In Genesis 2, it's not used until the Exodus account, where Moses is looking back at creation and giving the 10 Commandments. That's where the word Sabbath is first, maybe not first, but that's where it's introduced from Moses much, much later on. Day 7 of creation is really the first Sabbath, and it was experienced by God and all of his creation. And really the basic concept that we have from the Genesis account is the word rest. That's what Moses is pointing back at when he's introducing it as one of the 10 Commandments as given by God. It's this concept of resting, to stop working. And that's what God did, and that's what he wants for his creation to do as well. Now, the Sabbath is actually a pretty significant theme all the way through the Old Testament and even the New Testament. So you can think of today's message sort of like an introduction on the Sabbath. Certainly not going to be a comprehensive look at everything there is to know about the Sabbath. But since we find it all the way through both Old and New Testament, we're going to look at 3 different passages regarding the Sabbath. Again, how should I rest? Number 1, I want to share with you is this: Sabbath involves rest and worship. Sabbath involves rest and worship, as basic as we can get. Rest and worship. Let's look at Genesis 2, 1 through 3 to start it out here. It says this: Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Most of us are probably familiar with this Sabbath day passage. God created everything in 6 days of creation. Then on the 7th day, God rested. Again, we know that God wasn't tired. He didn't need the rest. But a couple things here. He was finished. He was completed with his creation. And furthermore, we think he was modeling for us as people created in his image that we need to rest. We do get tired. We do need to slow down. This account really tells us about God's intent for the Sabbath. Now, actually, in this passage, we are not commanded here to keep the Sabbath. That's going to come later on in the 10 Commandments that we read in Exodus. So what should we take from this passage that's 3 verses, very short? First, let me say, we should notice that God rested because he had completed his creation. He finished his creation. So let me say it this way: God was a hard worker. And so I think God expects us, his people, to be hard workers as well. Now, I say this with trepidation because I don't mean to step on any toes, but I do think it's important to point out that it's possible. It's possible for some that you don't practice Sabbath very well because you don't work very hard during the week. That's a big deal. Like we should, I know, but understand there's a big pendulum swing here, right? And you might find yourself on the side that's like you're way too busy. And so you tend to swing more toward having too much on your to-do list, and you need to slow down. But you may be on the other end of the pendulum, and you're not busy enough. Now, I know, hey, this changes throughout every season in life. Every situation's different. This is not a hard rule for us to focus on today. But we need to understand God finished because he finished creation. He rested because he finished something. So if you don't work hard, then maybe that's another message that maybe you should just tune out the rest of the message today, okay? And we talk about laziness, another message or something like that. That's important for us to notice here because God rested. He rested because he completed creation. Now, it's interesting that in Genesis chapter 2, we find that God did ordain rest. God ordained rest. But if you keep reading throughout the Genesis chapter 2 account, we also find that God ordained something else. He ordained hard work. He did. God gave Adam and Eve a job to cultivate the ground, and he did so before the fall. So we should not say that there's anything wrong with work. Now, work becomes jacked up because of the fall, but work is good. Work is good. Again, I know this changes throughout every season in life, but work is good. Secondly, let's notice just the most basic definition of Sabbath. Rest. To cease working on the seventh day. Now, if it were a 21st century individual instead of Moses writing about the seventh day of creation, like a 21st century person would probably have God out on this Sabbath day, towing the jet skis out to the lake and cramming a movie in the afternoon, and then rushing out to dinner at a busy restaurant. That's what we'd probably have God doing on the Sabbath day. But God doesn't do any of that. He rests. He rests. Lastly, let me point out that God sanctifies the Sabbath day. Isn't that interesting? He makes it holy. He sets it apart. He sets apart the Sabbath day as a holy day of worship. On this day of rest, the Lord has fellowship, communion with Adam and Eve. What a picture of worship. Isn't that awesome? So it's not that we just need to kneel in our homes and pray all day long or something like that. No, it's like the most basic concept of this worship we're talking about is that God was just with them. He was with them, right? That's awesome. So what do we take from all of this? I've recommended this book a number of times already, but I'll keep recommending it because I think it's that good. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. I would highly recommend it. Pastor Comer, the author of the book, talks quite a bit about Sabbath throughout the book. There's one chapter specifically about rest and about Sabbath. But for me, one of the biggest takeaways from this book was to sort of start treating a Sabbath day like a holiday that happens every week. And for me, that was really transformative. So my wife Aubrey and I, several years ago, maybe 5 years ago or so, we began to notice that our Christmas day was kind of being taken over by lots of other things. Now, both my wife and myself, our family is spread out all over the country. Both sides of our family. We don't have any immediate family that lives in Billings. And so there's always this temptation to be traveling on all of the holidays for that matter. And so we just decided, hey, we love going to see family, but we made a hard and fast rule that we are not going anywhere on Christmas Day, okay? We love you, family, both sides. Let me say to the video, we love you, family, if you're watching this. but we're not going to see you on Christmas. You're welcome to come see us, but I am not getting in my vehicle on Christmas Day, period. Just not doing it. It's been awesome. So we just wake up. Of course, we wake up at like 5 a.m. because our kids are like ready to open presents, that sort of thing. We have a nice, fun breakfast, and we take our time to open up presents. We read the Christmas story, the original Christmas story, Luke chapter 2, and then we just hang out. And it is awesome. Since we made that change, I love Christmas Day. Love it. Because we're not driving in a car somewhere. Love it. And so, just a simple question. What if we started treating a weekly Sabbath day of rest like a holiday? Maybe it's just super elementary for all of us, but what would that do for you? I tell you what, for me, that sounds awesome. Sounds fantastic. What if we treated our weekly Sabbath day like it was Christmas every week? We just shut everything off and we just do the things we love doing, but we don't do too much, and we drink lots of coffee and we eat some good food and we hang out with people that aren't going to stress us out, and we don't work, and we just choose, I'm not going to do anything I don't want to do on that day. I'm just going to enjoy it, and I'm just going to be with God. I don't know about you, that sounds awesome. Sounds awesome to me. Church, that's at least in part God's intent for a weekly Sabbath day: rest and worship. Notice how broad those categories are. Very broad, right? What's restful to you might not be restful to me. And I don't think this is a hard and fast rule. But think about how you can incorporate rest and worship. And let me just say, I do believe that God intends for us, even as New Testament Christians, to slow down, shut down work, and to take a day of rest and worship. I believe that. How should I rest? First, we need to take a break from our busy lives to rest and worship. Secondly, Sabbath rejects slavery. Sabbath rejects slavery. Now, perhaps you think it's odd to connect the dots between Sabbath and slavery, but actually, the scriptures do just that. Moses gave the 10 commandments from God to the people of Israel. And the 10 commandments, they're still, useful for us today. We should still follow the 10 commandments today. But these are ways in which God's people are to walk in faithfulness to God. And the Sabbath commandment is actually the longest commandment. It's interesting. Now, we first read about these in the book of Moses, the book of Exodus, written by Moses. And Moses, with the Sabbath commandment, he connects the dots between the Genesis account and this particular commandment. In essence, he's saying, you must observe the Sabbath because God observed the Sabbath. And then in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses repeats these 10 commandments to the next generation that's about to enter into the promised land. But it's interesting that these two accounts of the 10 commandments, the Exodus account and then the Deuteronomy account is slightly different. Moses adds something in the Deuteronomy account that wasn't in the Exodus account. So I'm going to read the Deuteronomy account of the Sabbath commandment. It says this in Deuteronomy 5, verses 12 through 15. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. And then in verse 15, this is the unique part in Deuteronomy. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. A couple takeaways I want to point out here. First is to just point out that God is commanding Israel to take a Sabbath day of rest so that everyone can rest, including the animals, including the kids, including the servants, including the working class, the poor, everybody. You need to rest so that everybody can rest. When you refuse to rest, you place that burden on other people as well. When Israel, when they were slaves in Egypt, they were legitimately slaves in Egypt, and therefore they did not get a day of rest. But now that God has brought them out of slavery, God has given them freedom. And so God's simply telling them, hey, you're not going to treat people the way that you were treated. You were treated as slaves. You were brutally oppressed by the Egyptians. But you're not going to treat people that way. So even the working class or the poor people, the servants in Israel, you're going to treat them with dignity, and you're going to give them a legitimate day of rest. Now, okay, we're taking this passage and we're fast forwarding 4,000 years or so to the 21st century. So what does that tell us today? Different culture, different situation. Well, here's what really sticks out to me. When you and I choose to rest today, we give permission to others to rest. Especially if you're a parent or a boss or a business owner or really a leader of any kind. When you rest, others will rest as well. When you disobediently burn the candle at both ends all the time without stopping and resting and honoring God in the way that he's called you to, you will place that burden on other people as well. And so let me just say, I think God would say to the Israelites, how dare you oppress people the way that you were oppressed? And I think he would tell that to us as well. How dare you oppress other people? No, you need to rest. And so others will do likewise. Hey, it's going to look a little bit different today than it did back then, and that's okay. But we need to rest. The other thing here that I think is just a monster takeaway. They are no longer slaves. They couldn't practice the Sabbath. I mean, they had a good excuse. Perhaps you have a good excuse, legitimate excuse. Perhaps you don't. They had a legitimate excuse. They were slaves. They weren't allowed to practice the Sabbath while they were slaves, but they are free now. They're free. And so they are able to rest. And so they need to use that freedom to rest the way that God has created them to rest. Now, I think we'd probably all agree that it would be crazy for these Israelites to go back into, willingly, to go back into slavery now that they've tasted freedom. That would be crazy, wouldn't it? But yet, that's exactly what we do to ourselves by the slavery of materialism and the busyness of life. I understand we can't control everything, but there's a lot of things we can control. Let me share with you just a personal example from my own life, and I really want to emphasize this is a personal example from my own life, not something I'm putting on anybody else. Several years ago, we found this really cool small teardrop camper that we purchased. It's an R-Pod. It's this used little camper. It's really cool, and we thought, hey, let's get that, and we're going to get into camping as a family. And so we did. We bought that little camper, and for, I think, 3 summers, something like that, we had this little camper, and we, for the most part, we enjoyed using this camper. But over the course of time, having that camper, in the season that we are currently in, we started to notice that there was just this pressure. There was this pressure to use it as much as you can because you have it, right? Just sensed that pressure. Like, thankfully, we didn't have any debt on it, that kind of thing. That would have been another burden. Didn't have any debt on it. Wasn't a financial burden, that sort of thing. But it was just sitting around, for like 358 days out of a year. It sat in a storage area. And about all we could use it is 7 or 8 nights a season. And we just sensed this pressure. It's like you have to use it because you have it, right? Now, again, there is nothing at all wrong with having a camper. Go for it, right? However, let me say this. I do think that toys like that, whatever it is, many people go into debt for that sort of thing, and that's another form of slavery that we just put on ourselves. And so I do think that is, maybe there's not a commandment against it per se, but it's probably not the wisest thing to do in the world. There's that old proverb that continues to ring true. The borrower is slave to the boat. I mean the lender. The borrower is slave to the lender. Some of you got that. Thank you. Okay, so assuming you can afford toys like that, by all means, go for it, right? But in our case, in the season that we're in, the Lord just kind of compelled us. I don't think the Lord was like commanding us. I don't think we were living in sin, nothing like that. But the Lord just kind of compelled us to sell that thing for this season because we just felt like we were slaves to that thing. And again, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't have a camper, okay? If it doesn't keep you from honoring God, then go for it, right? But it was bogging us down, big time. And there's probably another season that we'll try it out again. The reason I tell you this story is to just highlight how all of us have a tendency in the 21st century in which we live to enslave ourselves. We don't even realize we're doing it. But it's so easy for us to do it. Like, if we can say yes, we often do say yes, but it doesn't mean we should say yes, right? So let me give you just a few big ideas here about things that can enslave us. Debt can enslave us, okay? Debt can enslave us. And I got to tell you, I've experienced the freedom of getting debt paid off. Praise the Lord. Because you just don't have that grip on you anymore. I don't have to work a certain number of hours to pay, debt outside of my mortgage. Like, I just don't have to. And that's a good place to be. And if you're not there, I would say, gosh, you should get there. Because debt can enslave us, and it's not fun. Hobbies can enslave us. I love hobbies. I have hobbies. But I know they can enslave us. Believe it or not. It might sound awesome, but just make sure you count the cost. There's more than just a financial cost to everything, right? So count the cost. Hobbies can enslave us. As a parent with elementary school age children, I know that kids' sports schedules can enslave you. They can. I'm all for sports and things like that, but is it worth it? Fourth, perhaps your job is enslaving you. I know we all need to work. We all need to work, right? There's a lot of things we can't control there, but it's possible that your job is enslaving you. And then last one, our pursuit of stuff can enslave us. It just can, and it shouldn't. My point is, if you're too busy to take a day of rest, then you have some pruning to do. Because you may be living as a slave when God doesn't want you to live as a slave. He wants you to live in freedom. Again, we can't control everything. I get that. But there's a lot that we can control, that we choose to do, and we choose to put ourselves back into slavery. God doesn't want that for us. And let me finally say one more thing in this point. When we take a day off, when we take a Sabbath day and when we make resting a priority, in a sense, we are trusting in that action that what God has given me is enough. I don't have to burn the candle at both ends every week, all the time, every year. I don't have to, because what God's given me is enough. It's enough. How should I rest? Sabbath involves rest and worship. Sabbath rejects slavery. One more thing, number 3. Sabbath should be a blessing, not a burden. Sabbath should be a blessing, not a burden. If we think back to the Genesis 2 account, you may remember that God blessed the Sabbath. Seems kind of weird that God blessed a day. And it's interesting that God blessed 3 things in creation. He blessed the animal life, he blessed human life, and then he blessed the Sabbath. That just seems weird. It just seems a little bit weird, right? Why did God bless the Sabbath? Well, I don't think I can answer that question comprehensively because the passage doesn't tell us comprehensively. But evidently, God knows that we need a weekly Sabbath day of rest. Now, I believe also that, and by the way, this is true for all of God's promises and blessings, I think. But if we obey God by observing the Sabbath, we will experience blessing. Why? Because God blessed it. It's as simple as that. Jesus also speaks of the Sabbath as a blessing instead of a burden. In Mark 2:27, Jesus said, or Mark 2:27 says this, "Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." In other words, the Sabbath is meant to be a blessing for us. We are not meant to serve the Sabbath. In Jesus' day, the religious leaders, known as the Pharisees, they had really turned the Sabbath into a oppressive religious rule. It was a burden in every sense. They even weaponized the Sabbath. Now, Jesus, when we read about how he treated the Sabbath, Jesus observed the Sabbath. He did, okay? So to say that New Testament Christians just don't even need to care about the Sabbath, I just don't think that's correct. Jesus observed it. I see nothing in the New Testament that would say that we should not continue to observe a Sabbath of some kind. Jesus observed it, but he did it way differently than the Pharisees. We find that there's some times that Jesus healed people on the Sabbath day. And it seems like he did it on purpose to tick off the Pharisees. I love that. It's awesome. And Jesus almost entirely rejects the Pharisees' interpretation of how to honor the Sabbath. I mean, Jesus' take on the Sabbath is way different than the Pharisees' take on the Sabbath. Let me just say, in short, that Jesus reminds us the Sabbath is meant to serve humanity as a blessing, not a burden, not a burden. And so I believe as Christians, I believe that we have the freedom. Thank you, Lord. We have the freedom to observe a Sabbath in a way that works best for our situation. If the Sabbath becomes a burden for you, you're doing it wrong. If it becomes a burden for you, I think you're doing it wrong. As we wrap up, I want to share just a couple more things with you here. There's another book that I would highly recommend to you. It's called Soul Shaper by Dr. Keith Drury. And it's a book about spiritual disciplines. And you may not realize it, but rest is actually a spiritual discipline. Arguably, rest is the very first spiritual discipline created by God. And I'd like to share with you, I don't do this very often, but I'd like to share with you a whole page from Dr. Drury's book on rest, his chapter on rest, because just excellent. Let me share it with you. This is what Dr. Drury says. It could be that we resist the discipline of rest because we do not believe strongly enough in heaven. Have we come to believe the old slogan, "You only go around once, so grab all the gusto you can"? Do we really believe that this life is all there is? There's nothing more? Have we become practical materialists? Do we fear that the only time we have may be this time, these hours, this weekend, so we'd better cram our schedules full before our time runs out? Perhaps we imagine heaven, if we imagine it at all, as the ultimate day of rest, and are determined to do our work now and to have our fun now, because there will be neither work nor fun in heaven. I think that's dripping with sarcasm, by the way. If we do, that thinking illustrates how pagan we have become. But what if heaven is a place of work without weariness? Or what if heaven is a place of fun with such wonderful joy that it wouldn't even compare to water skiing or backpacking? What if heaven is like a life of stimulating conversations, wonderful dining, and all the things we now rush through on the weekends? In other words, love this. What if this life isn't all we get? Would that cause us to take a less frantic approach to the coming week? Maybe we should all just stop reading this chapter right now and go take a much needed nap. Man. I thought that was really powerful. So I want to close with just a few practical takeaways that maybe these things could help you just integrate Sabbath into your life. First is this: choose a day to do nothing and rest. Choose a day. Dream about it. Think about it. Figure out how it works in your life and your rhythm and your season, all that stuff. For my family, Saturday is typically, not always, but typically Saturday is our Sabbath day. And it's awesome. And we're still working on it. We've got a lot of work to do, but it's been great. Secondly, do your housework on your day off. Rest on your Sabbath. I break this one too often. Even yesterday, I felt this pressure of I was doing this house project on my Friday day off, and then on Saturday, I try to keep as my Sabbath. There was this desire and this pressure to, well, why don't I just burn through Saturday and keep working on that project, right? And then I thought, well, shoot, I'm preaching about Sabbath on Sunday. I definitely can't do that. I break that one often. Sabbath day is not the day to just kill yourself doing house projects. Maybe there's some husbands yeah, did you hear that? Third, review your hobbies. Review your hobbies. Hobbies are great, but it's possible you've become a slave to your hobby. Fourth, exercise the discipline of saying no. It's a good thing to say no sometimes. Or even exercise the discipline of saying not yet, or not now, or not in this season. Next, stop celebrating excessive busyness. Okay? We should not celebrate that as a local church. We should celebrate rest. And then last, focus on integrating a Sabbath blessing. Please don't walk out of church today feeling burdened. I want you to dream about what a Sabbath could and should be for you, and I hope it brings a smile to your face. It should be a blessing. Okay? And you may even have to kind of take some time to work your way into whatever that looks like. It's a blessing, not a burden. Let's close in prayer today. Lord, thank you so much for giving us this gift. Lord, I pray that you would help us to trust in you, but I do pray that we would that we would trust your word, and that we would integrate these principles into our lives. Lord, I pray that we would not feel a burden on it has to be done this way and this time, and all these things need to be accomplished to do it right. No, Lord, help us to just focus on the blessing that you want to give us through observing Sabbath. Help us to slow down. Even when it's not popular, help us to slow down and to rest. We love you, Jesus. Thank you for this gift. We pray this in your good name. Amen.